Okay, we've got time for one last question. It comes from Carl Nixon.
Thanks, Tony. My question's to Chris Richardson. You commented a few years ago, and in fact today, that our younger generation should be rioting in the streets due to the growing intergenerational inequality. To me, this includes unaffordable housing, high underemployment, a crushing population ponzi policy, eye-watering HECS debts, poor wage growth and axed penalty rates, ever-increasing living costs, poor graduate employment opportunities and low rates of apprenticeships, a mountain of private and government debt, and a looming climate change disaster. What do you think needs to be done to improve opportunities and outcomes for our youth, or should we just let them eat cake and await a Pickety moment?
Thanks, Carl. Thanks for noticing. I have said it. And it's...
Do you still think that?
I do still think that. You shouldn't riot, all right? But you should... young people in Australia are the least politically engaged, and you're the ones losing the most out of the decisions that we're taking. Now, those are just two sides of the same coin. You look at some of the disastrous decisions that have been made over time, assuming a China boom was permanent and spending on ourselves, disastrous decisions in super, we can and should do better in climate change, all this sort of stuff. Don't riot, but be more engaged and be upset at what my generation has done. Australia's been brilliantly successful. I'm very, very proud to be Australian, but we are still making big and important mistakes. And it's going to be up to you guys to stop some of that damage before it gets worse.
Chris, I'm just going to quickly get you to give them some advice, since you're suggesting not rioting but getting angry. So what should they be focusing on? Which issues do you think need to change to end that inequity?
Sure. To pick an example of one that's close to my heart, the budget. We talk a lot about fairness, but... for the most prosperous generation Australia's ever seen, to run up $500 billion in debt, meaning that young people will either have to pay more tax or get worse services to try to close that gap over time. You can and should do better. We heard actually some love. I actually loved it, and it was Stephen who mentioned first, what about a Q&A compromise? Heather's mentioned, Australia is losing the art of compromise as we split into our camps. But we're only going to make sensible compromises if the people most affected, the young people of Australia, start to become politically engaged. And I mean, do research, hear what the experts are saying and try to get better outcomes.
Now, I'd love to go around the rest of the panel on this, but I'm told we're out of time. We did hear a pretty big statement from Chris Richardson. That's all we have time for tonight. Please thank our panel, Chris Richardson, James Pickety.